Salutations. This is a glorious day or morning so far in Charlotte, North Kakalaki. Anyway, I hope you found my first two podcasts informative, educational, and entertaining. Because to me, I get my entertainment from being educated. But anyway, what I'm attempting to achieve is to get people to understand that many of the concepts that we are taught, that we believe are true, are in fact fallacies. They're not true. And I used bonds in the very first episode. I used stocks in the last episode. And today, I'm going to use the plebeian favorite, housing, real estate, house to live in as an investment. I'm going to debunk that. Some of y'all feelings are going to get hurt. Don't get caught up in your feelings. All right? Check your cognitive biases. Remember from my last video, I talked about cognitive bias, right? Check that. All right. Here we go. What have we learned so far? That a lot of the false constructs center around the word inflation, which is, by definition, not what you're taught, i.e. prices going up, or the symptom or the result of inflation, which is the expansion of the money supply. Now, when you expand the money supply, like with anything else, when you increase the quantity of something, it devalues it. So, in essence, when we believe a price of an item has gone up, it really hasn't. Thank you. It's the currency has devalued against the price of the house. The currency has devalued against that particular asset. That's what occurred. So if we take the average increase of the M3, which is one of the measurements of the money supply. Most of you people use M2 or M3, right? Then we know that's average about 7% a year. 10 years, that cuts the value of the currency in half. Which means what? All things being equal, it's going to take that much more currency, right? 50%, 100%, whatever the percentage is, to buy that property. Now, that didn't happen in a vacuum. You think you made, X amount of dollars during that time period. Well, everything else went up too. Everything else went up. Maybe by the same percentage, maybe less, depending on the item. So, what did you really make? Well, again, let's use housing. With housing, most people don't consider to line up their lawn, like for example, let me show you. To line up the lawn, you have to buy a tool. To cut the grass, you have to buy a lawnmower. Or you pay somebody to do that. You prune your trees, you paint your house. Because if you don't do those things, the bushes, make sure, the bushes don't overgrow. What would happen if you didn't do any of those things? If you let it just continue to grow, right? Nature would destroy your house, right? So it's an ongoing expense to maintain the house. Okay, just to maintain it. Now, we're not even talking about repairs yet. We're just talking about maintenance. It's different from repairs. Now, repairs, you got plumbing, electrical, roof, AC, you know, what else can go wrong with your house? Well, you got to add up all those expenses along with your fixed expenses, your HOA if you got HOA fees. Yeah, wait. Let's not forget the mortgage interest, okay? Your mortgage interest, your HOA, your property tax, your homeowner's insurance, okay? So when you get your check, you can look at your, when you buy your house at closing, they give you what's called an amortization schedule. And your amortization schedule, go look it up, go find it. Go find your amortization schedule. Look at how long you've owned your house, how long you think you're going to own your house, how much money you spent in interest alone, okay? So then you deduct all that from your profit. And now here's a kicker. The kicker is, then you have to deduct inflation. And we already saw in the last two videos what happens with that, right? So for the overwhelming majority of people, and let me digress for a moment. For years, what I just said, I would say on Facebook, for example, and people would be vociferous in their disagreeing with me. Man, they would be really passionate about, how wrong I am, come up with all kind of logically fallacious responses. Now, mind you, most people use logical fallacies to assuage their cognitive dissonance, right? Which stems from their cognitive biases. And last episode we talked about what a cognitive bias is. You can look that up. I'm not gonna go over it again, right? So, and I'm talking about people who have education from GEDs all the way up to advanced degrees like PhDs or law degrees. And man, they would just argue until one day I literally did the exercise where I showed them the profit from a sale of a house I lived in, and I juxtaposed it against one of my investment properties, rental income properties. It was only then that they understood. It was only then. And then, of course, they would say, well, a house is a utility, basically, which I never denied. I'm just trying to demonstrate that you are propagandized to cooperate with your oppression. Because if you believe that stocks always go up over time, 20, 30 years, or a house is an investment, you're going to go into debt to buy that house. You're going to put your savings in that stock. And what happens when you do that? Well, who's getting money when you buy and sell a property? Your realtor, your mortgage broker, the house inspector, the title company, the repairman. I can go on and on and on and on. Okay, you taking on that debt enriches other people. Okay. Now, debt, most people don't use debt the right way. That's for another discussion. I don't mean to digress. Because I can digress, man. Because this topic is really, it goes into everything. It's like a giant squid, man. But in any event, in the very first video, I talked about when you look at a return, right? Most people look at the nominal profit, and they think that's their profit. They don't know about the concept of real. And I defined that already. And real, basically, restated in case you didn't see the first video, which I encourage you to do. Nominal is I like to use the comparison as like literal. If you get $100 literally, and you put it in the bank, 10 years from now, you take out $100, you literally get back that $100. But the value of that $100 can't buy 10 years from now what you could buy 10 years preceding, right? So that's real. What can you buy at that time is what's real, right? The real value. In other words, you got to deduct your expenses and inflation. Inflation, when you deduct inflation, that's your real return, okay? So, and so in order for you to cooperate with your oppression, they have to, or did, change the definition of inflation. Because if you understood clearly what I just said, there's no way you would go for, buying a bond today at 5%, or putting your money in the bank and thinking, oh, I'm making 4%, 5% on it, and I'm doing okay, when inflation is at 6% or 6.5%. And that's the CPI, not the definition of inflation, right? So they don't want you to understand the concept of negative real rates as opposed to positive real rates. Now, I explained what negative real rates were or is. I'm going to explain what a positive real rate. All right, let me go back. A negative real rate is, use an example. Inflation is at 6.5%. Your bond is at 5%. People think they're making money at 5%. No, you lost money. 6.5 to subtract 5, you lost 1.5%. Now you compound that out over time. How much did you lose? Well, over 10 years, you lost half the value at 7%. And where did I get 7% from? As I put it in the other videos, it's the growth of the money supply, which is the original definition of inflation, right? So if you understood that, you wouldn't go for the bullshit. Let me tell you what you wouldn't go for. You wouldn't go for Jerome Powell, J. Powell, saying that he wants to be another Volcker and kill inflation. You wouldn't go for that shit. You know he's lying. Why? Because to kill inflation, you have to have positive real rates. And what is positive real rates? Positive real rates is when the interest rate is above the rate of inflation. So if the rate of inflation is at 6.5%, real rates have to be at least higher than that. Let's say 7%. Okay? And that will kill inflation instantly. And it will also kill the economy. Why? Because our economy is based on the false construct of debt, pile upon debt, pile upon debt, and you go for it. Now, this video was made for people who don't want to go for the okie doke. Because you have a lot of people that will go for it. You got a lot of people that will come to understand what I'm saying and still go along with it. An example, we're talking about real estate, right? Because I had digressed because I had to give the definition of positive real rates. Man, I lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. I was talking about people going for it. And I was going to use the example of in almost every house I sold to a consumer, not an investor, but a consumer, they all wanted assistance, from they call it a concession, a seller's concession, right? Basically what that is that the seller gives X amount of dollars to be able to help the buyer close because they don't have the money, all right? Or they see how much money the seller is making. They're like, well, he has to come off a little bit of cash, right? So, but they believe the seller is coming out the seller's pocket. It's not. It's coming out the buyer's pocket because the seller's just going to raise the price to compensate for that. And the buyers are cool with it. They're like, okay, I'm willing to pay more. I don't understand. I don't understand why people knowingly pay more for shit. Like, last couple of years, housing prices depreciated precipitously. Let me rephrase it. Our currency depreciated precipitously against housing. In other words, housing appreciated by orders of magnitude against the currency. So it's going to cost people more currency, more money to buy a house. And they went for it. I would not. No, you make money when you buy something. You realize the profit when you sell. The Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett, how did he become one of the richest men in the world, if not the richest? He bought assets, whether companies or stocks, undervalued, right? Anyway, so getting back to housing, you are not, for most people, you are not making money, or not making as much money as you think you are, because of all the expenses you didn't consider, especially the interest expense and the inflation expense. When you factor those things in, like with my situation, I got a check for like 80 grand, but after all the expenses were deducted, that I owned the property over 10 years, actually it was 12, I wound up losing like 30, 40,000. Okay? And that's typical. You got a check in your hand, I made 100 grand, 150, 200. And you think that's what you made. No. Extrapolate all those expenses, including interest expense and inflation, and see what your profit really is. Right? That's your real profit or loss. Now, you do get back what's called imputed rent. And by the way, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to link the video that I made on Facebook to this podcast, so you can actually see as I go through, as I extrapolate the numbers, right? You can actually see it. That's what I'm gonna do. I'll do that. So, and like I said, until that day, people argued with me all the time. They don't argue with it anymore. So do that for your own self. Okay? Oh, I was about to say, here's a positive. Here's a positive from owning a home. After you deduct all the expenses, you actually get to add back what's called imputed rent. Imputed rent. And what imputed rent is, you're not living for free. You can't live anywhere for free, right? Whatever you believe the market rent is for the house in your community, in your neighborhood, you get to add that back in, right? And that's what boosted my $40,000 loss. And maybe I made, I don't know, a little over breaking even, right? When you add back imputed rent, right? So, but anyway, I hope that you get to understand that a lot of what we're taught, a lot of the concepts are false constructs designed to extract our wealth and keep the robber barons wealthier and in power. And this channel will explore those ideas. And I hope that if you like what you heard thus far in the other 2 podcasts, that you share it with your friends, you like, and you subscribe. All right? Y'all have a great day.